Welcome to Pushing Forward with Alycia, a podcast that gives disability a voice. Each week, we will explore topics like confidence, ambition, resilience, and finding success against all odds. We are creating a collective community that believes that all things are possible for all people. Open hearts, clear paths, let's go. Welcome back to Pushing Forward with Alycia. I am Alycia, and I'm so excited about today's guest. I say that constantly, but I really am. We became friends. I feel like it's been 3 years. I was on her podcast. I think that's how we met the first time I came on your podcast, and we made friends. I made friends with you and your mom. We were on the runway of dreams together. We've stayed in contact, supporting each other's platforms. Today's guest, Peri R. Finkelstein, an Emmy award-winning marketing consultant, keynote speaker, TEDxer. She just made it onto the TEDx stage. Founder and CEO of Team Peri Foundation, where she has helped raise over $1 million for charity. So she knows how to hustle too. She's been featured in Forbes, her TEDx talk, Always Wanting More and Stepping Out of Line. Peri is also a marathoner. That's also on my bucket list, by the way. And she's the co-host of Step Out of Line podcast. She was born with a rare form of muscular dystrophy, which we'll talk about a little bit. And she's been turning her challenges into immense fuel, making changes, impact, advocacy all over the world. Welcome to the show, Peri. It's so nice to see you again. Okay, so let's start with a little bit of voice technology, if that's okay, and accessibility. Before we dive into your story, Peri, I want to start with something that listeners will notice right away, that you are using an accessibility tool today, a communication tool, a voice device. Can you share a little bit about this assistive technology that you're using today and how tools like this have opened doors for you specifically on the speaking stage and has given you the ability to share your ideas further and further around the world?
For most of my life, I felt ashamed of using a communication device to speak. In middle school, I started using an app called Proloquo for Text, a text-to-speech application designed to help people with speech impairments communicate. You type your message as you would in a text or email, and the device speaks it aloud for you. The challenge with that technology is that it has zero emotional intelligence. Sass, sarcasm, and tone completely disappear. Punctuation and pronunciation are not always reliable, and the voice sounds robotic. There is also very little room for spontaneity. You often have to prepare answers in advance and run sound checks to avoid glitches, which still happen anyway. And when you are already being bullied in middle school for your disability, having a robot act as your voice does not exactly help. Students mocked both the device and me daily. Some teachers did not want to wait for the device to speak, since it is slower than a human voice. They often skipped over me when I raised my hand. That eventually affected my participation grades. In that environment, it was expected that one talk quickly and normally, or not speak at all. College was much more forgiving. I participated using my physical voice, my communication device, or the Zoom chat box. For the most part, my voice was heard, aside from the occasional professor who preferred to distance themselves from the disabled student. Unfortunately, you will find a few of those anywhere. Because of my diagnosis, my speech can sometimes be garbled or difficult to understand, and I fatigue easily when speaking for long periods. That is why I use technology known as augmentative and alternative communication. It helps ensure that my ideas are clearly understood. At the end of the day, this technology is what makes conversations like this possible. It allows me to share my ideas, advocate, and make sure my voice is heard. My physical voice is still part of how I communicate, especially with people who know me well. But for speaking engagements and podcasts, I rely on AI voice technology. In fact, I started re-recording my speaking parts in my own podcast using my device so that my voice can be better understood when people listen to an episode of Team Peri Step Out of Line. I recently switched to a platform called 11 Labs, and the difference has been incredible. The voice sounds far less robotic and more like a young woman, and the AI does a much better job with tone, punctuation, and pronunciation. For the first time, it feels like the technology is starting to reflect the personality behind the words and who I am. I am no longer ashamed of using a communication device. It's merely a tool to help me get to where I want to go. And sometimes, it leads you to the coveted TEDx stage. With that being said, I do find that there is a great deal of bias that surrounds the realm of augmentative and alternative communication, and is not always welcomed. It requires an open mind, patience, as I said earlier, and the willingness to allow AI technology to be a part of the conversation. I used to despise using my communication advice, as it made me feel more disabled, and I absolutely hated that feeling. But over the past few years, I've realized that sometimes I need a little assistance, and if I want my voice to be heard loud and clear, this is the only way to do so. I got over my ego and embraced the era of AI technology and maximized its potential, while simultaneously raising awareness for alternative forms of communication on social media, as well as through my speaking engagements and podcasts.
I love so much about that. Number one, I feel like it's perfect timing with all of us adopting AI in a much bigger way. So I feel like that's probably going to expand people understanding the tool one way or the other from the way you use it through accessibility. I think that the timing is really great. And I love that you mentioned that you finally got out of the way of your own ego. And I don't even know if it's ego, because I've always felt the same way about my wheelchair too. When I was younger, I didn't want to be the girl in the wheelchair. And how do you mask that? Which we both are wheelchair users as well. We both know it's virtually impossible to mask it unless we're in the car or something. I think all of that you just shared is so timely. And it just shows the power of leaning into the technologies and the devices that we have now. Where does it take you? Straight to the red dot on the TEDx stage. So congratulations, Peri, on your growth through all of that. Genuinely. It's been lovely to watch, honestly. So good. Okay, can we talk about growing up a little bit? For listeners that are meeting you for the first time, which probably not many, I am sure many of my followers of the podcast are your followers and have a clue of who you are. But for the ones that don't, can you paint a picture of what it's like growing up with muscular dystrophy and how that experience has shaped the person, the woman that you have become today?
Growing up with muscular dystrophy shaped nearly every part of my childhood. I have a form of muscular dystrophy known as nemaline rod myopathy, which is a genetic condition that causes weakness in my muscles and nerves, which, for me, has meant surgeries, mobility challenges, chronic pain, and a lot of time in medical settings. I have never been one to sugarcoat anything, so I will be honest when I say I had a very hard childhood. I grew up in doctor's offices and hospitals, so I did not have much of a traditional childhood. In many ways, I never really had the chance to just be a kid, which forced me to mature quickly. Most of my friends growing up were doctors, nurses, child life specialists, and therapists. I struggled to connect with kids my own age because they did not really understand what my life looked like. And I had a level of maturity that came from being pushed to grow up faster than everyone else. I was also severely bullied throughout childhood and into my teenage years, which complicated my relationship with my disability even more. I was always that girl rolling through the halls of a medical practice where everyone knew my name and my story. My parents did their best to give me as normal a childhood as possible. I joined Girl Scouts, took dance classes, ballet, of course, and always pushed myself academically. But at the same time, I was navigating surgeries, illnesses, and the daily reality of living with chronic pain and fatigue. As an adult, I have had to come to terms with the fact that there is so much I want to do, but sometimes my body simply runs out of energy. I often compare my life to a battery that never quite reaches 100%. Most days, I hover somewhere between 20 and 60%. At the same time, living with muscular dystrophy has shaped me in ways I would not trade. It taught me to make the most of every day and to follow my passions fully. As a young girl, dancing made me feel free and powerful. It also taught me to fall with grace when my long legs inevitably got tangled together. That mindset has stayed with me. I have learned to embrace opportunities and the spotlight, even when the introvert in me is apprehensive, because you never know who might need to see what is possible. Yes, I was ashamed of my disability for many years, but I do not feel that way anymore. At this point in my life, I just want to live fully, follow my passions, and show people that disability does not define what someone is capable of. If anything, it has pushed me to dream bigger and to demand more of myself. As an overachiever, I am never satisfied with completing one accomplishment, but rather yearn to keep going and climb new heights. I do not wish to slow down, but rather continue to push myself harder to get to where I wish to go.
And you're so doing that. I feel like just in the last few years since we've met, your advocacy and your dream of being on stages has gotten bigger and you just keep reaching for the stars. And I love what you just said about letting shame go. I think that's a big thing for a lot of us with disabilities to let that piece go. It's freeing, right? How free do you feel when you just let that one piece go to just be who you are? Yeah, it's incredible. That was really beautiful. I know that there's people behind that journey for you, for all of us. We cannot do this alone, especially when there's so many medical complexities involved and just navigating systems and all of that. When you think about growing up and navigating your disability, who were the people in your life who really stood beside you to help you shape this beautiful, powerful woman that you are today?
When I think about the people who helped me navigate life with muscular dystrophy, my family immediately comes to mind, especially my mom. I truly would not be where I am today without my parents and siblings. But my mom has been my biggest partner in all of it. She is the one person in the world who really understands me. We are both very goal-oriented and definitely type A personalities. Every day we ask each other what our goals are, compare notes, and at the end of the day we check in about what we accomplished and what we want to tackle next. She is also my co-host and voice on the Team Peri Step Out of Line podcast and the Chief Operating Officer of the Team Peri Foundation. So she is deeply involved in everything I do. She is the person I bounce ideas off of, even the really ambitious ones, and vice versa. We balance each other out, even if we sometimes drive my dad up the wall in the process. She reads all of my writing first, takes me to doctor's appointments, holds my hand when I need it, and pushes me out into the world when my dad would probably prefer a quieter day at home. He's not the adventurous type. At the end of the day, my mom is my biggest supporter. But she is also someone who constantly reminds me that I am capable of more than I think. Outside of people, animals have also played a huge role in my life. Growing up, my dog Bully, who has since passed away at the age of 17, helped me through so many difficult moments. Now my dog Tula is my whole world and keeps me grounded and feeling loved. I have always joked that dogs understand me better than humans sometimes. When I am out in public, they will literally turn their heads and look at me like they are saying hello. My mom says I have some kind of dog aura that gets their attention. Music has also always been a constant source of support for me. I grew up listening to artists like Kelly Clarkson, Pink, Katy Perry, and Stevie Nicks, and their music carried me through both the happiest and hardest moments. Today, my playlists change depending on my mood, but they include artists like Alex Warren, Gracie Abrams, Chappell Roan, Ed Sheeran, Taylor Swift, Benson Boone, and Teddy Swims. Music has always been a space where I could process what I was feeling and feel a little less alone. Over time, I have also realized that sometimes when you cannot find the community you need, you build it yourself. That is really how Team Peri and the Step Out of Line movement started. At the end of the day, support systems are everything. Living with a disability can be incredibly isolating, but the people, communities, and even small sources of support that show up for you make it possible to keep dreaming, keep pushing forward, and believe that the life you want is still within reach.
I love this. And you just plug pushing forward. Very nice tie in there. The strategy. Thank you, Peri. I love your mom so much. She's such a beautiful person, and you two are such a great team. I love how you just talked about how you both support each other, and you see it when you're around the two of you. That was really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It really paints a picture of your life. Let's talk about speaking, because I've had the privilege of watching you grow into your stage. A lot of the community that follows this podcast wants to know how to speak and be bold and put yourself out there in that way. Was there a moment for you, the shift that made you realize that you wanted to speak up, tell your story, be vulnerable like that, and do something bigger? Can you talk about that a little bit?
The moment that really shifted things for me was stepping onto the TEDx stage in May 2025. That was when I realized I wanted to use my story for something bigger. For months leading up to that talk, I worked on writing it, not even knowing if I was ready to share something so personal with the world. It was the most vulnerable and emotionally honest piece I had ever written. Up until that point, I had never shared my writing on such a public platform, and I certainly had not shown that side of myself to others outside of my inner circle. But something interesting happened while I was writing it. The words poured out of me, almost as if the story had always been waiting to be told. Even then, I still did not know how people would react. Standing on that stage, though, something inside of me clicked. I realized that sharing my story was not just something I wanted to do, it was something I needed to do. I had spent so many years bottling everything up, and I finally understood that telling my story was a way of freeing myself. I also realized that if even one person hears my story and feels less alone, then it is worth it. That was the moment I understood that my story was bigger than just me. Since the talk was published in October 2025, the response has honestly surprised me. It may not be a viral TEDx talk, but it has reached people in really meaningful ways, and that has meant more to me than numbers ever could. That experience inspired me to start my Substack, where I share more personal essays about my life and topics that are sometimes too complicated or too vulnerable to discuss on social media. It is a more intimate space for my writing. Before that, I had a travel blog, but I rarely allowed myself to go deeper or be truly vulnerable. Writing the TEDx talk changed that. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and for the first time, I felt free to share my voice. Now, between my Substack and working on my memoir, I am finally in a place where I feel proud of my writing and ready to share it with others, no matter how large or small the audience might be. Looking back, stepping onto that TEDx stage did more than help me tell my story. It gave me permission to finally own my voice.
So much there. And I want to talk about it for a minute, because the TEDx moment, number one, I think it has those awakenings for all of us. A similar thing happened to me in navigating the writing and just being up on stage and feeling like there's an audience there. You can tell me if it felt like this for you. It felt like a moment just for me. Show up, be in your own space and body and mind and heart and soul and struggle and all of that, and just let it go. Did you feel like that too?
So, like, I did all the work to get there, so I deserve to be there. I'm an introvert, so that means I felt at home, like at peace with myself, because I always thrive in the academic environment. I always have. So I felt like in the safe space, it wasn't unknown for me. I felt like this is what I'm supposed to do. Even if no one hears me, I feel like this is my shot.
Yeah. And you know what? I love that you mentioned that. The same thing happened with me. I did my TEDx talk and I'm like, this is going to be my viral moment. The reality is that sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But what will happen is, and what happened with me, it wasn't a viral moment for me, but it's been such a powerful piece of content for me over the last 4 or 5 years now. It grows. It's the credibility piece. It's the launching your platform piece through it. So there's so many other things that happen with it that if it doesn't go viral, come along with it that are powerful in your platform. You will see that. I'm sure you're already starting to see it. Anyway, so that whole viral thing happened to me too. And I think that's typical, honestly. Okay, so your TEDx talk is titled Always Wanting More and Stepping Out of Line. When did it start showing up in your life? And what does stepping out of line really mean to you? I know this is big in your platform.
The idea of stepping out of line actually came from a speech I heard in 2019. Actor and comedian Alex Borstein won an Emmy and shared a story about her grandmother during the Holocaust. Her grandmother was standing in line, waiting to be shot into a pit, and she asked the guard what would happen if she stepped out of line. The guard told her he would not shoot her, but someone else probably would. And she still stepped out of line. She survived. And because of that moment, Alex Borstein was able to stand on that stage years later. At the end of her speech, she said, "Step out of line, ladies. Step out of line." When I heard that, something really clicked for me. I realized that, in many ways, I had been stepping out of line my whole life. I just did not have a name for it yet. And honestly, I realized I probably was not stepping out of line enough. That idea stuck with me. I ended up writing a college paper about the step out of line theory, and about a year later, I adopted it as the theme for my podcast, which is now called Team Peri Step Out of Line. Over time, Step Out of Line became more than just a podcast title. It became a philosophy for how I try to live my life. Since then, it has also grown into a space where people can share their own stories about the moments when they chose to step out of line in their lives. To me, stepping out of line means refusing to stay inside the mold people expect you to fit into. It means challenging limitations, making bold choices, dreaming big with ambitious ideas, and allowing yourself to show up fully as who you are. Sometimes it even means making people a little uncomfortable, because growth and authenticity rarely happen when everyone stays in line and follows orders. At the end of the day, stepping out of line is about permitting yourself to live authentically. If someone cannot accept you for who you are, then that is their issue, not yours.
You've asked me how I have turned my story into impact and income. That is why we created the Own It Mastery Collective, where message meets monetization. It's a community driven, built for everyone, and designed by someone who understands barriers and builds way beyond them. We are launching very soon. Join our interest list now at alyciaanderson.com. The link is in the show notes. I love how she said, step out of line, ladies. Let's do this together. What an amazing story. I don't know if we talked about that last time. That's powerful. What a powerful story. I think it's incredible that you found a moment in your life and it's translated into your movement. That's really amazing. You raised a ton of money. You're a boss babe, a hustler. You've raised over $1 million for charity, which is an absolutely incredible accomplishment. And from one salesperson to the next, bravo. Was there a moment where it really hit you that you're actually making a huge difference for other people?
For 15 years, I was fundraising under the Team Peri label for another organization before we officially became a nonprofit in January 2024. During that time, I never really focused on the total amount raised. I was always focused on the work and the organization we were giving back to. But in 2022, we realized we were getting very close to raising $1 million over those 15 years. Once I saw that number within reach, It became a goal I was determined to hit. I developed tunnel vision. Not just because I wanted to say I had raised $1 million, but because I knew how much impact that milestone could create. That is what I now call our $1 million story. Once we finished that chapter, as a foundation, we formed the Julie Hyatt Adler Scholarship, where we raised over $50,000 to establish a perpetual educational scholarship that will begin in September 2026. And there is our current initiative, the Peri Project, which supports caregivers in hospitals. Altogether, across those efforts and others, Team Peri, and now the Team Peri Foundation, have raised over $1 million. And for me, it was a reminder that small efforts, repeated over many years, can grow into something much bigger than you ever imagined. But the moments that really hit me are not the numbers. It is when we hear from the people impacted by the work that we, as a foundation, do. It is the caregivers in the hospital sharing how much the support means, or being able to tell the family behind the scholarship that their loved one's legacy will continue helping students for years to come. Those are the moments when it really sinks in for me. At the end of the day, I do not measure success by how much money we raise. I measure it by the impact we create. The stories are what fuel me and remind me that this work is making a real difference.
Powerful. So powerful. And I love that you have different avenues, caregivers, education. Well done. Well done. It's inspiring me that I need to have some sort of an arm like that too, to be giving back. That's amazing. Okay, let's talk about the marathon mindset. What do you think? I have such a goal to run, roll, push, whatever, a marathon. So you've run, you can talk about it, 11. Wow. That really blows my mind, honestly. When you're deep in a race and everything is hurting and you want to quit doing what you're doing, what keeps you going? Let's talk about this path a little bit.
For most of those 11 marathons, I was pushed in a jogging stroller by my mom for 13.1 miles. The first year I joined her, I wasn't sure why she wanted me to experience the bumpy, long, and the 3 a.m. start. But the moment we hit the course, I fell in love. The wind in my face, the rhythm of runners passing by, the stampede of professionals thundering past like an earthquake, and the adrenaline of it all. In 2016, I had enough of being a passenger princess and decided to take action. I walked over the finish line to see what all the hype was about. The moment I crossed, something inside me sparked. From there, I kept pushing, adding distance, building endurance, and challenging myself in ways I never imagined. By 2022, I had reached the limits of what my body could do physically, though the journey had already taught me so much. Walking in a half marathon for me has always been about more than finishing a race. It became a metaphor for life itself. Every step required training, discipline, and endurance, and the pain I felt was nothing compared to the joy and pride of accomplishing something people told me I would never do. I wasn't walking for applause or to be told that I was an inspiration. I was walking for the little girl who was told she wouldn't walk, whose life was somehow less than others. Each step that I took, I drowned out the noise and proved to myself that I was capable of more than I ever thought possible. Pulling my ventilator on the back of my gait trainer, also known as a walker, and enduring the burn of every step, that's how I became an athlete of my own making. I miss those feelings deeply, and I hope one day to regain enough strength not just to walk again, but to reconnect with that inner athlete. For me, participating in a half marathon has always been about more than finishing a race. It's about proving to that little girl inside me, who was told she wouldn't live past the age of 7, that she is capable of more than anyone imagined. Every step, every burn, every mile was about reclaiming my power, my freedom, and my inner athlete. I walk for that, not for anyone else. When I do walk again, even if it's just a few steps, it will be for me and no one else, because that is where my power and freedom lie.
Hire this girl, people. If anyone's listening, this is so motivating. I love it. That is so incredible. Congratulations. I want to come to a marathon with you. Can we plan that? Let's do it together. I would love to. So, starting your nonprofit at such a young age, that's a pretty big step. What was the moment where you thought that you're not going to just support causes, but you wanted to become a nonprofit entrepreneur? I don't even know if that's a thing, but we're going to make it up if it isn't.
When I was about 8 years old, I already knew I wanted to build something I could call my own. At that point in my life, I was constantly in and out of hospitals, and I was craving a sense of stability and control. I wanted something that was mine, something I could grow and leave my mark on. I think I was probably born with an entrepreneurial spirit. I was always drawn to the idea of creating a business or organization that led with heart and impact, where helping people and giving back mattered more than financial gain. As a young teen, I visited a Sprinkles Cupcake ATM in New York City with my parents, and I was completely fascinated by the concept and genius idea of entrepreneur Candace Nelson, whom I've since had as a guest on my podcast.
Wow.
Such a simple idea, but it made people smile and feel something special. I remember thinking that I wanted to create something that could bring that same kind of joy, smiles, and meaning into the world. As I got older and became more involved in fundraising, that dream started to take shape in a more serious way. At a certain point, I realized I did not just want to raise money under someone else's umbrella. I wanted to build something that reflected my own ideas, my own values, and the kind of impact I believed in. I also wanted the freedom to make the decisions that I think are best for the organization. When I eventually formed the Team Peri Foundation as I was finishing up my MBA studies, I realized I had so many passions and causes I cared about that I initially set the organization up with a very broad mission. I wanted the flexibility to support different initiatives that aligned with my values. But during the first year, I quickly learned that if you want people to understand and support your work, your mission has to be clear and focused. So I refined our mission statement to better reflect what we stand for and the impact we wanted to make. Even though I have pursued other professional paths, like freelance marketing consulting and earning my MBA, the work I do with the Team Peri Foundation has always given me the greatest sense of purpose. It is the one thing in my life that feels mine fully, something I built from the ground up that continues to grow and make an impact. Building the Team Peri Foundation was the moment I stopped just supporting other causes and started creating something that reflected my own vision and values.
Amazing. And in that, I believe you're currently working on the Peri Project. What is that initiative and why is that important right now?
As a child, I spent weeks and months at a time in the pediatric ICU. During some of our darkest moments, my family was lifted by the kindness of others. I remember every act of generosity shown to us when we felt overwhelmed and afraid. Even then, I knew that one day I would build something that paid that kindness forward. Through the Peri Project, we support parents and caregivers in pediatric ICUs who are pouring everything into their children while quietly running on empty. By providing self-care kits and partnering with child life programs, we remind caregivers that their well-being and mental health matter too. To date, we have distributed over 150 care packages across NYU Langone Hospital, Long Island, and Cohen Children's Medical Center, with plans to expand to Stony Brook Children's Hospital in April 2026 and New York Presbyterian Morgan Stanley Children's Hospital in June 2026. But the true impact goes beyond the number of kits delivered. It's the message behind them. You are seen, you are valued, and you deserve care. When caregivers feel supported, they are stronger advocates and steadier pillars for their children. The change I am deeply passionate about is shifting how society views disability, caregiving, and inclusion. I want to dismantle ableism, normalize conversations around caregiver burnout, and ensure families navigating medical complexity feel supported rather than isolated. This work is personal. I have lived it. I know what it feels like to sit in a hospital room for weeks at a time and watch the emotional toll it takes on a family.
Powerful, honestly. Extremely important work and so timely. So many corporate conversations that I'm having for speaking specifically, this is your niche. They're focusing on caregiver advocacy in corporate spaces too. This is amazing. Okay, so people see the TEDx talk, the fundraising milestones, the marathons, all the things. What are the parts of your journey that people don't always see?
People see the TEDx talk, the fundraising milestones, and the marathons, but they don't see what it takes for me just to get through a normal day. It can take me 3.5 to 4 hours in the morning to get ready, and the same amount of time at night to settle into bed. Every day is a test to see how my body feels and how much energy I have to work with. They don't see the number of medical treatments and medications I manage daily, or how something as simple as a business meeting, a podcast recording, or a few hours of focused work can send me into a spiral of fatigue. Even going to one doctor's appointment can knock me out for the rest of the day because of how much planning, energy, and recovery it takes. They also don't see the toll it takes on my parents as they are my caregivers, or the chronic pain I live with that I try my best to push through quietly. There is stretching, suctioning, bathing, dressing, treatments, and therapy sessions like occupational and physical therapy that fill my weeks and often take time away from my work. I often work in between treatments because my time and energy are so limited. And emotionally, there are parts people don't see either. They don't see the nights when I hit my breaking point and cry myself to sleep while reading on my Kindle. They don't see the battles with insurance companies or the weight of constantly having to advocate for basic care. On the outside, I try to stay composed, but behind the scenes, there are moments when it all feels rather overwhelming and impossible. That is also part of why I speak so openly about my life. I want people to understand that disability is not just a moment on a stage, a press article, or a social media video. It is a full, complex life behind the scenes. At the same time, there are small joys that keep me grounded. Spending time with my dog Tula, reading, painting, writing, and creating give me moments of peace and normalcy. I keep myself busy because it helps me focus on what I can still do, rather than everything my body struggles with. I think people often see strength and resilience when they look at my life, but the truth is, I am not strong every single day. There are moments when I am exhausted, frustrated, and scared. I just choose to keep going anyway, and to step out of line because sometimes that is all I have, and the hope that tomorrow will be a better day.
So powerful. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing all those things. I think that's extremely just helpful for audiences to understand the full scope of the path. And you are so powerful and resilient, but I know and I'm sure that things are hard on certain days for sure. Thank you for giving us your energy for this interview, honestly. All right, we end with a pushing forward moment. I have a feeling what it's going to be, but can you leave a little pushing forward motivation for our community as we say goodbye today?
If someone feels like they do not quite fit into the box the world has drawn for them, the first thing I would say is that there is nothing wrong with you. In fact, your differences are your secret weapon. Sometimes it just means the box was never meant for you in the first place. And you need to create your own space where you feel safe and accepted. even if stepping out of line in those moments is perceived as inconvenient. I remember speaking at Brandeis University in October 2025, and at the end of the talk, a mother in the audience asked me how her son was supposed to get through the hard things he was facing, especially bullying at school. She was clearly emotional, and her son was sitting right beside her. I told her something that I truly believe. You have to find something that you love enough to make all of the noise fade into the background. For me, that was books and academics. For someone else, it might be sports, art, music, or something completely different. The important part is finding something that is yours, something that reminds you of who you are outside of how society sees you. That moment stayed with me, because after the talk, students and adults kept asking questions as if I had all the answers, which I definitely do not. But it made me realize that sharing my story and speaking honestly about my experiences was helping people feel seen and understood. So to anyone listening who feels like they do not fit in, I would say this. You do not have to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's version of who they think you should be. You choose who you want to be and how you wish to be perceived by others. Your path is allowed to look different. In my case, I often do not follow a conventional path, as it has never really worked in my favor. In fact, sometimes being brave enough to step out of line is the best decision that you will ever make.
Yeah, it is. Oh, Peri, thank you for such a lovely, beautiful, powerful conversation and all the work that you are doing for our world. I cannot wait to see where you go. It's literally to the stars. So congratulations on all the growth. Congratulations on your TEDx talk. We're going to leave links to all of the things to follow you, social media, TEDx talk, all the things that you mentioned. One of these days, you and I are going to be on a stage together too. Another stage. Thank you for coming on today. Thank you to our listeners for joining. This has been another wonderful, powerful episode of Pushing Forward with Alycia. And that is literally how Peri and I roll. We will see you next week.